grow on an object, isolate it immediately. Now let's look at some specific techniques for salvaging different types of objects. Smaller textiles can be readily moved by placing them on a flat surface. Large rugs, because of their size and weight, require special handling.
The ceiling fell in and let all the water in on the rug. We're going to try first to get most of this debris off the rug, and then we're going to try and remove some of the water, and then we'll roll it up. Ordinarily, I would like to turn the rug over first, but we'll roll with the face in from this side just as carefully as we can. Then we're going to need some extra people to try and carry it out with as much support as possible. So if we can start moving some of this debris, try not to scar the surface of the rug. Try and just pick it up if we can, and then if we can throw it as far over into the corner as you can, so that it'll give you that sponge. In the area where the heaviest amount of water, you can see the water has pooled in this area. After we move away some of this debris, I'd like you to try to sponge up some of that. 4 of us will try and place the sheet on this end. See if it's big enough to go this way. Don't put it down if it's too small. You making it to the end?
Not always.
Turn it. Make sure it goes over the edge of the rug. Okay, now before we start rolling up from this end, just try and make the sheet make some contact overall, because I think there's some bleeding dye. There's definitely some bleeding dye here. We didn't get as much water out as we hoped, but at least the sheet will be an absorber till we get it down to the barn. This side is not as wet at all. Okay, now starting from this end, rather tightly, although not too tightly. Let this fold over the edge if you can. If it doesn't work, then don't worry about it. Most important thing is just to get a good even start and try and stay together. Try and keep it nice and even with the edges. Forward. Don't let it go into the puddle of water though, just let it extend. Are you over the edge?
No.
We need a little more on this side.
Yeah,
oh, well, you do too. Okay, that's all right. That's the best we can do. This will be very fragile as a big roll, so we'll have to really offer it as much support as possible in carrying it to the truck. Now stop. And this one up and around. Yeah. Don't that it's too heavy. We need more help.
Can we get some help, please?
Now just pause for a minute. Okay, now put it down all together. Easy. We need some more toweling materials, but we'll go for those and offer and give it a little bit.
If appropriate space is available, you'll want to air dry most wet textiles. As an interim step, though, freezing may be appropriate.
It needs to be frozen. If you can't find a freezer truck, then find some place that we can get it stuck in a freezer.
With three-dimensional materials, that includes furniture, ceramics, as well as sculpture and boxes containing materials, the important thing is to provide proper support to maintain the integrity of the object.
And support the back.
If furniture joints are saturated and the glue is coming loose, you'll want to tie a cord or piece of twine around the object to hold it together. The same principle applies to things like boxes.
If we don't have any of the boxes available, then I would get something that is solid underneath that can really support it, like a piece of wood or what have you, and move it out to a location where it's going to be, where we're going to collect the materials outside the building, so there's no other problem.
The first question with paper is, are we looking at something that can be easily replaced? Of course, historical papers or unique documents are another matter. If the only damage is from fire or soot, there's no immediate problem. The paper is stable. But if the paper is wet, you'll have to take some kind of action. Mold can begin growing within 48 hours.
Here's a good example. This one has been sitting in the water, and it's soaked on the back. And as you can see here...
Don't try to open or close wet books. Move books in plastic crates, not cardboard boxes. Pack the books flat and separate them with wax paper or freezer wrap.
And yet here we've got cards that have been put on. A very good situation where we can...
When you have single sheets that are wet and stuck together, don't try to separate them. Pack them, and if there are a lot, interleave every 2 inches or so with freezer wrap. If you find wet paintings, you'll want to let the water run off, then carry the painting horizontally. It should be dried as soon as possible. If you have to pack it, avoid touching the paint.
Think about is, as you said, photographs are going to be probably the key, because they're the ones that are not going to respond. They respond to water much more quickly than anything else. Okay.
Photos that are exposed to water pose a particularly difficult problem because most are highly susceptible to water damage, but different types require different treatment. You really need to understand what you're dealing with. There isn't time in this program to go through all the details, so I'll just give you a brief overview. Photo processes that are most sensitive to water include daguerreotypes, albumin negatives, glass and metal-based collodion emulsions, lantern slides, glass stereo views, and gelatin negatives. Immediate air drying is recommended in all cases. On the other hand, conventional black and white or color negatives and motion picture film that has become wet should be kept in cold water until they can be properly dried.
Cassettes may not be
The
recoverable.
cassettes may not be. It depends how soaked they are. These feel like the outside is quite wet, but the inside may not be that wet. But I'm not going to push it at this point. We can actually immerse this if necessary, because since it does seem to be fairly clean, and then it can be checked with a tape, an audio company.
We probably should get some buckets of clean water.
Yeah.
You'll treat computer disks in a similar fashion.
This one has, interestingly enough, this one has information on the outside. So no matter what we do with the box, we're going to have to transcribe what information is there. Oh, and we're dealing with discs, some more discs. The actual conservators, the curator is going to really need to know, let us know what the value is and if there is a backup off-site. If there's a backup off-site, then these are not a big issue.
If there's not a backup off-site, disks that have become wet will have to be rinsed in clean, distilled water. We've covered a lot, so let's go back and review the big picture for a moment. Emergency planning starts with a process in which everyone from every level of your organization is involved. That process is ongoing and needs to be made a regular part of your work. Start making your plan by assessing your risks and then identifying the many resources available both within and outside of your organization to counter those risks. Again, drawing on your entire organization, go through the process of setting priorities as to what in your collection is most deserving of protection. Your plan will be completed with an emergency organization chart and a schedule for training. Next, we look at mitigation, all those steps you take to prevent problems from arising in the first place. Mitigation starts with many of those things you're already doing, building maintenance, and backing up records. Be sure to use storage techniques that maximize protection of materials. Make sure your detection and alarm systems are working and up to date. If you undertake renovations, be aware of the hazards that accompany this kind of work and the steps that can be taken to mitigate them. Mitigation is backed up by preparedness, assembling a cache of emergency supplies and staying in contact with outside sources, including police and fire departments and utility suppliers. Finally, We went through a training exercise that took us through the response and initial recovery at a disaster site. This included initial notification, securing the site, conducting an initial assessment, and the salvage techniques used for specific kinds of objects. That exercise gave us a good look at the kind of damage you might encounter after a fire and suppression of the fire. You've probably realized by now that with emergency preparedness, you never get to a point where you say, okay, that's it, we're done. We're ready for anything that could possibly happen. In fact, you're never done, because your situation keeps changing. Your facility and your collections change over time. Personnel turnover, both within and outside of your organization. Technology also changes. A whole generation of new sprinkler systems has been developed in recent years. And look at communication. Now, just a few years ago, a phone list didn't include cell phone numbers. You have to stay up to date, but once you have the basic documents written, updating should become part of your regular routine. You'll want to conduct periodic training and drills. Make them part of your annual schedule. You'll never be finished, but you can be prepared.